So welcome back, everyone. Very excited to have Costa today, a very special guest and a friend. Today we have Costa, the head of CS at Lokalise. And today we'll be mainly diving into what strategic frameworks and tools he uses at Lokalise to drive the customer success at scale. And we'll also touch on automation, leadership, and where AI best complements the human-led CS that we're using today. So welcome to the podcast, Costa.
Thank you, Jose. Thank you for having me. Pleasure to be part of your podcast and be a guest here.
Thank you.
Looking forward to the chat and sharing how we serve our customers and how we aim to do better things.
Awesome. So let's start maybe, I think Localize is a very interesting company in the sense that you guys are super international. You have customers all over the world. You have different size customers as well. So one of the challenges that I think CS leaders typically hit at one point when they start scaling is that how to set up international teams. So curious to know how you guys, or how have you approached this, perhaps in terms of structure and how you support different markets effectively.
Absolutely. So to start off, like Localize is operating across the globe. Of course, we have more than 3,300 customers at the moment. And the main markets, I would say, based on customer size and number of customers, is EMEA and US, where US it's growing quite rapidly, and of course EMEA as always. APAC is where we also have a pretty strong presence, which organically grew over the years, and we also, of course, support from the CS function. When I joined in the function in customer success, we already had international mindset onto how to support customers. And we already had two teams where we had customer success managers supporting the US and the EMEA customers. A couple of years ago, we had it split more in terms of one CSM handling all sorts of type of customers. However, as we were scaling and we were focusing on the customers that have higher needs based on their localization and translation needs and the complexity of their workflows they want to introduce with us, that's when we split the team into enterprise, managing enterprise segment, and of course, plans that we have for our customers, and also something we call scaled customer success managers, where the difference is that the enterprise CSMs manage roughly 40 to 50 accounts, while the scaled CSMs manage between 150 to 200, 220 accounts. Of course, that brings its own challenges because you have to scale the functions and you have to start building different playbooks that actually really correspond to the needs of the markets. So we kind of try to hit like that, you can call it the 80-20 rule.
Yeah,
And this is where we try to kind of codifying the 80% and empowering the CSMs to tailor 20% of engagement. So you
mhm,
create like a repeatable playbooks for your customer journey. So from the moment that you hand off an account to onboarding, adoption, expansion, advocacy. So that's how we have tried to scale it in enterprise and scaled CSM. We have very senior CSMs with a lot of industry experience. We try to hire with people that come with CS background or even CS background plus localization translation background,
translation.
which is a plus. So really industry domain knowledge, which helps us to really have a quick ramp up for that person and really get them embedded into the playbooks and of course bring fresh ideas. Um, we try to productize CS, as you can call it, having success plan, telemetry-driven health, automated journeys, use a clear capacity model. Of course, that brings to different challenges. How can you scale what you already have scaled? And
Yeah.
that's where technology come in place, and that's where we have reached out to Velaris, for example, and we're like one of your customers, where we're now we're building more and more automations to actually really help us to scale the team.
Fantastic. I'm glad. I didn't want to do this shameless plug, so I'm happy that we're able to help you guys build that scalability across the world. From a role of data and automation, are there any particular signals or metrics that are particularly relevant for you guys?
Yeah, absolutely. So So we have a certain in like when you look at customer success and how I like to look at it, it's like leading and lagging indicators when you're measuring a CSM or a CS team. And that breaks down and like goes down in terms of what you do on a daily basis with the customers
Yeah.
and the signals that you need to look at. So we have defined like the kind of like the non-negotiable uh KPIs or metrics that we're looking at, like life cycle stages, SOA, success plan structures, standard QBRs, risk and health definitions. What are those? And from there, define, link it up with the right data so we can actually measure that across the board. Um, of course, we're trying to secure like customer journey where we have the right Q&A reviews. We're trying to monitor NPS, CSAT, G2 reviews to really measure the impact that we're making. When it comes down to the signals, we have a very robust kind of forecasting as a maybe as a non-standard thing in customer success at Lokalise. We do forecast. We forecast for GRR and NRR purposes for the business to
Nice.
support our expansion teams, and we have a 180 days retention forecast program that is very well built around what are the what are the churn signals that we see, what is the adoption, what is the activity on the account, and from there we actually predict how the business is going to look like in 180 days, for example. And of course, we do kind of like a re-forecast, like a quarter before, because
Brilliant.
as
Yeah.
retention and renewals don't happen on the day of the renewal or on the week of the renewal. It happens the moment you actually start onboarding the customer. So
Yeah.
already in 90 days, 180 days, you should know where you're going to land with that customer based on the value that they have received and
Yeah.
perceived from their side across the journey with you. So this is really important that you have the right system. And now with Velaris, we're trying to scale that where you can in the future do that with a click of a button, for example, with the right metrics that actually indicate you. And
Yeah.
you can do it if you have 60 accounts renewing next quarter as a scaled system, you can do it with a click of a button. Or if you have 20 high valued customers renewing next month, next quarter as an enterprise CSM, where things are in terms of you have the right signals, you have the right data coming from all the sources, right? At
Yeah.
Localize, we have a lot of data, a lot of engagement platforms as any other SaaS tool, like the support channels, the email, the recordings that we have in place. And Velaris is helping us to bring all of this, and of course, the usage that we track on our at the back of like our platform, that kind of combining it, you can really build predictable signals. And that's where AI also can
Yeah.
help or automations as well.
Exactly. No, I think you guys have a pretty advanced setup in terms of the stuff that you guys are doing to predict. And I completely agree that it starts from the kickoff, right? Where you start to understand if the customer is going to renew or not. You mentioned before that you obviously have kind of these more like strategic, more high value accounts, and you have a lot of smaller customers. And you guys, I know that you do a lot of automation. How do you like do you have a system or something that helps you to understand like where you draw that? Because you could potentially start to automate everything, right? But for the bigger accounts, it's typically very human led and it makes sense, right? It's more relationships, there's a lot of stuff, there's more stakeholders, there's more strategy that goes into that. Um, where do you typically draw the line of the stuff? Do you have like a line in your mind, or is it more a way of complementing, like you can have as much automation as you want as long as it complements the human side? How do you think
Mhm.
about those two sort of elements? Because I know that you have some customers that are like pretty much fully automated and then some are pretty like high touch.
Absolutely. As I think any other company, we tier our customers, right? And we set those expectations from the get-go, right? So everything comes from how your sales team, how your marketing team is positioning your service level that you're going to provide to the customer. So you're not promising the enterprise level support to the, like the lowest plan
Yeah.
that you have. Of course, that doesn't scale, and the ROI for the business is like never
Yeah.
gonna be there. However, we try to automate what is repetitive, like the low judgment work, you can call it, like the data capture, the The recordings really help you to get the right action points so you can actually properly follow up with the customer. Informative cadences, like on, for example, the roadmap, which is typical from the marketing communication standpoint. We tend to automate part of the onboarding
Yeah.
across all of our customers. But when we go with the higher tier customers, that's where our journeys are becoming more human in the loop model, where automation is until one part of the journey, and after that, customers need more custom approach.
Yeah.
A customer of ours on enterprise can have 5 integrations that they need to integrate with 5 different teams across their business. And that requires more tailored approach that we take with them versus, let's say, a medium or mid-market customer that you can call it, where they start with our traditional Pro plan, which has
Yeah.
a lot of great functionalities from our platform, and they're fine with like just a kickoff and maybe another 2 sessions to get started, and they have achieved their goal. And you can say that they have really achieved the value of the product so far from what they wanted to achieve. However, like I think the human in the loop is where you really make the difference for the customer. And that's what's going to differentiate in the future and in this AI era, where you can have as much as AI as you want, but this interaction, even the one we are having right now,
Yeah.
cannot be replaced by an avatar or whatever it's called nowadays. And this is where CSMs, especially the profile we have, which is highly technical, you can call it consultative, thought
Yeah.
leader in the space, comes in and brings best practices. We, of course, have more technical folks in the company, like solution engineers and solution architects, that come and bring a more high value or high level strategy on
Yeah.
if the customer lacks the resources internally to do. However, customers like Localize always has been and will be customer centric in a sense that we're always going to have the human in the loop whenever we have the onboarding, we have the QBR, the EBR, executive business review, for
Yeah.
example, or when we discuss expansion, when we actually try to not just sell Localize, but actually sell what actually could be bringing more value to the customer at the end of the day, because recurring revenue comes with recurring value. And if you don't
Yeah.
have this, that's what we're aiming to do with having that. Of course, we do a lot of roadmap informative sessions, a lot of, you can call it best practices,
Yeah.
education on the new features as part of the traditional customer success function, as you can say. However, it's not something that for high valued customers or high touch, white glove sort of approach, we
Yeah.
would replace with some sort of automation.
Yeah. I agree, and I think you made a point there with AI, and we'll jump into some of the AI stuff because I'm curious to hear what you think. It's like some of these bigger accounts, right? The customer is never going to tell an avatar like, oh, this change is happening in the company and these are the priorities and stuff. And yes, you will always be able to like get a lot of information from the internet if it's a public trading company, or pull signals from different places and make hypotheses. I think that relationship game and that the ability for the CSM to build that trust, right? And that definitely, we're still at least very far away from that being replaced. But talking about AI, and I think we are living in very exciting times. How are you guys experimenting, thinking about experimenting with the CS org? Where are you guys on that journey?
Localize, we aim to have AI first mentality, where teams we are empowered to think like, how can I automate or how can I become more efficient with AI and the tools at hand, or even think outside of the box and think of any other tool that can help me to become better at my work. And
Yeah.
customer success is no different. We have it in our support team, we have it in our solution engineering team, we have it across the engineering and marketing and other teams. And at customer success, we are trying to adopt what our vendors are providing us, first off, right? You try to look at what they have. So we have Google is introducing like different new tools like Google Notebook LM,
Yeah.
which we're right now using extensively for collecting the knowledge and asking questions there, where before you had to go to multiple resources to actually find it in Confluence or Slack or Google Drive. That's one very powerful tool, for example, that you can leverage. Gong AI, of course, brought a lot of, I would say, nice and maybe must to use functionalities across GTM. And like with the Gong debrief summary, that's like very powerful because, for example, as a leader, I like to go through conversations and see what has been happening. And that provides me like in a quick summary what has been talked about the conversation. I can click on it and I can see what was discussed. I can ask specific question Gong AI about the health of the account and how likely is even to renew. These are questions I tend to even ask. Even when I initially started, I was just experimenting. It gives you very detailed answer, which when you go to one-on-one with a CSM, they're very surprised sometimes how much information you know about the account, even though you've never talked to
Yeah.
that customer. And that's very powerful. Lately, we are also experimenting a lot with Velaris, where you folks have brought in not only the email helper to provide to help with building in the emails. However, like you can use the Velaris debriefer where you can actually really get all the information in one place from all your resources, from your support, from your Gong, from your Gmail, also like anything that you have interacted in the platform, like the notes, which are of course linked to our CRM. And that's very powerful because it also gives you this 360 view that is much needed for like on executive level or on AM level if they're going into conversation to go talk to a new team that might not be leveraging Localize yet, but they're exploring. Then we can actually see
Yeah.
what are the blockers, what not to talk about, for example, or what are the technical difficulties, or what are the product requests, or what are even the successes, which is the most important data account, so they can leverage that as a reference to the customer. And this is very much needed. Of course, we have built like some more advanced internal workflows where we connect OpenAI with Slack with some data that we provide, and we actually can prompt it or not prompt it, but just even ask an
Yeah.
account name, and it gives you all the data at hand, which is very powerful if you're heading to a call with a customer, because we use Slack on a daily basis. Like probably people spend a considerable
Most of the
percentage of their
time.
time in Slack, yeah,
Yeah.
in a remote environment because we're a remote first company. Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's really interesting. And yeah, one of the things that I was thinking about is that context, right? Like you have so much information that is really hard to look for, but it's just there, right? So it could be in your emails, could be in your support. And that's where the LLMs are actually really good at. So one of the
Yes.
things I was thinking is you mentioned that the AMs now use this feature sometimes in Velaris, where they can get that 360 view and they almost can prep, okay, maybe we shouldn't really talk about these things. We should highlight some of the wins. How do you feel like, because this is all very recent, right? People are slowly changing the way they work. How do you think the CSMs are, or maybe not, and not in particular at Localize, I guess like the role of CS as a CSM, how that's evolving in this sort of AI driven era or environment?
So I'm in customer success for 10 years, from which majority of my time, 7+ years, I'm in leadership role. But I've also had like as a leader, I had also portfolio and I've been a CSM myself. 10 years ago, like when Zoom was just starting, for example, as a conference tool, there was no recorders, there were no transcripts. Like you had to take notes, like old-fashioned way, on your notebook or your note function on your Mac or Windows,
Yeah.
and then put everything manually in the CRM, and then run a CRM like as neat and organized as you want. I had my first manager was German, and they're very strict in terms of having everything clean data and very
Yeah.
structured approach, which taught me like the fundamentals of how to run a proper CRM hygiene.
Yeah.
And now with tools like with Gong, where you can actually have your, for example, medic, and you can actually automatically with AI get the context on the medic, on every single letter from the medic, on the decision maker, on the anything else, economic buyer, and so on. You can just, with a click of a button, fill it in. So that's really powerful. Also, if you need to do a handover from sales to customer success, back in the days, you had to do it the old-fashioned way, like where you meet with the person, he tells you everything about it, and and then you onboard the customer. What is their use case? What are the first priorities? What are the most first milestones? Nowadays in Gong, for example, you can build Gong debrief that can look into all the conversations so far and extract that information for you and provide it for you. So there's a lot of powerful features that you can leverage across the journey
Yeah.
that free up time, and what you used to do for hours now takes you minutes as long as you work smart and efficient. Those are just a few examples, but
Yeah.
I think where AI comes in place is I used to manage in one of my early days like 350 accounts. I had to go through on average 5 to 6 tabs to understand the health or the overall, to get that 360 view
Yeah,
of the
that
account, to
situation,
make
context. Yeah.
a situation context, understand the signals, and then to interact. Look, what was my last cadence or my previous colleague who was managing that account, and from there to interact. With tools like customer success platforms and AI, that's given to you. And CSMs that start now or started like 2, 3 years ago when AI or CSPs were already in place don't understand how powerful and how lucky they are, because back in the days you had to do this all manual. And I think that's a big changer. And that's also what I try to always tell my team is like leverage the tools that you have at hand to become more efficient so you can spend more time with the customers. I I always say that we need to spend more time face to face with the customers, whether that's physical, whether that's digital, because that's actually what makes the difference. That's when you get more insights. To your point, that's how you understand what's happening on the business.
Yeah.
That's what you understand whether there's some risks, there's some opportunities, or things are stable. And then you just need to maintain and keep that relationship with the customer.
Yeah.
So that's really important. Um, and then
Do you
they can
think,
also
so I was going to
upskill
say that you were
themselves.
thinking, you made a good point there, which I was thinking about, right? Is that you've seen the change, right? Like you've been lucky, I think very lucky, right? That you've seen, maybe you had to deal with a little bit of shit when you were younger, right? But you've, you can appreciate all the benefits that this crazy stuff is bringing to us, right? Like you've done the manual stuff now. It's like there's this new way of doing things. Do you think the new CSM is nothing? It's not their fault, right? They're just younger and they start their careers later. Do you think they're spoiled or not spoiled, but do you think that there's something that maybe they're lacking because they haven't had that manual experience of how the world was before, or it's just pure efficiency and it just adds, it doesn't have any kind of potentially, I'm not going to say negative effect, but
I'm not sure. I think people tend to trust 100% what they get, the output they get. They always need to double check it, right? So when you ask me, like, where do we draw the line on the automation? There's a certain line where we actually stop the automation and we get the human in the loop, because, like, you can actually do more damage than actually good sometimes with all automation or AI.
yes, I agree.
Good intent, but actually the bad intent, if it's prompt wrongly, or if it's set up wrongly, or it filters wrongly in your workflow or scenarios, as Velaris calls it. And my I always double click or double check what's the output before I share with the customer, or I share it even internally when I ask, for example, AI to help me with data analysis or data crunching of what's happening across the business. Because sometimes there's this hallucination people talk about, like in AI, that
Yeah.
it could very much get outside of the frame that you're trying to put it in and tries to be very creative, which
Yeah.
is gonna hurt you down the line. To your question, I think the risk I see is that people might be too lazy to do this verification,
Mm.
right? And you
Yeah.
even see it sometimes when people even do LinkedIn posts.
Yeah, of
They
course.
don't even do sometimes the effort to read through it. It doesn't make sense actually what they've written or AI has written for them. They don't even put like this spice on the human touch from their side, and
Yeah.
they just automate everything, which down the line you lose interest. And that's the same thing. Like if you do 2, 3 outreaches like this to a customer, next time when you actually do a genuine one, the fourth time from yourself, they're not going to respond, they're going to ghost you. And
Yeah.
that's very much what I've also seen happening.
Yeah. I think one of the things that I was thinking about is like you had to be a lot more critical before, right? Because you had to come up with, even writing a good email was like something that you spent time. I remember like feeling proud of
Very
writing like a
much.
really, really good email. And you were like, yeah, that's great. Now And you had to have a bit of a,
And
you would,
you would pass it to your colleague on the right or the left to double check and see, is that
exactly,
technically correct? Is what I'm saying,
exactly,
does it make sense? And now you can just ask AI and then, oh no,
exactly.
score it from 9 to 10 out of 10, give me a rating. You can ask it all of this, what used to be like your pair, like your colleague, which we still do, by the way,
Yeah, yeah.
like through Slack in a remote environment ourselves, but you have like an assistant to help you with that.
Yeah, and also, so you like the email is just one example, right? But it's almost like we're going into slightly, in some cases, you need to be careful not to fall into this autopilot mode where you just rely on it too much. Okay, draft this email, and then you get a response, which might be also GPT generated. I don't know. And then you respond, and then you ask, what should be the plan of action? And then eventually you almost like you're losing your edge, right? That's where I think things could get a bit shady, right? For that type of, because then you stop adding value, you know what I mean? So you need to make sure, like systems need to make sure that they still have their edge, whether it's in making bold decisions. It doesn't have to be anything crazy, right? But it's still having an opinion, being a bit more critical. But yeah, super interesting times. The other thing I remember, one
That
of the times that we, oh sorry, go ahead.
No, I just wanted to say, like, you touched a good point, is like customer success needs to add value. When you send an email, and I've seen these colleagues of mine in the industry preach about it, and I very much agree with it. The check-in desk is at the airport or the reception in the hotel. Like, you don't send just, hey, I'm just here reaching out to check in. Your email needs to fundamentally, add value, because
Yep.
if you're like talking to a decision maker, a VP, C-level, or head of, this person probably has another 5 to 20 vendors on his tail,
Yeah.
and who are emailing him constantly. You need to stand out, and to stand out, you need to add value. I've seen something in your setup that can be improved. We've launched
Yep.
something great that you ask for it. Like those kind of like old school things that I would take notes and I'll think about it, and we would have the old school spreadsheet with customers requesting features, and then we would prepare that email and then send it, and then you would get 9 out of 10 responses because it was really touching their pain point. And
Yep.
nowadays you have this spray and pray model
Yeah.
sometimes where it doesn't result in even a single response.
Yeah.
Not what we do, but what I see across, and I also get outbounded or outraged myself.
Yeah. I was thinking about one of our conversations, you said something quite interesting, right? Which made me think about the balance, right? Because I feel like there's some things of the past era that are really good, like all this that help you be critical, that just help you, have that human aspect, whether it's like decision making or just like being in control and not letting everything just go on autopilot. But I remember you mentioned something quite interesting, like you said, like it feels like people are still thinking like it's 2022 still. What do you mean by that? Do you reckon it's like people are still talking about the same QBR stuff? And is it a mindset? Is it an echo chamber thing that you keep feel like things are still sounding the same, or is it more like a mentality that you haven't seen change? Or what do you mean by that? I remember I just thought of that.
So a couple of years ago, I listened to a podcast when someone said, and I think that was like maybe around 2022, where a person said, let's stop treating customer success as it's a child. Customer success is like 17, 18 years old function who is like already an adult, and it has its own opinion, set of like values and structure and ways of working. And that has to do with customer success fundamentally. In many organizations is different, right?
Yeah, yeah,
People talk about the customer success 1.0, which is the old-fashioned support function that is the glorified support, which
yeah,
people still talk about it, right? It's like 2020, and they try to bring the narrative that customer success is 2.0 nowadays, the consultative and approach that is revenue driven versus support driven function.
yep,
However, it's very hard sometimes for organization to shift from one to the other, or to start from what they aim because it it customer success, to be a revenue driven function or to be a support function, you need to have a very solid and good support team. At
that's
Lokalise, we
true.
have a fantastic support team having on average CSAT of 97, 98 score
That's
consistently
impressive.
quarter over quarter. And that's even impressive, like when we check the average data across like our support vendor that we use. And That brings me the stability as a CS leader that I can focus on what is customer success 2.0, 3.0, whatever you call it, to build this kind of like more revenue consultative approach. And when I say people still live in 2022, is there's like abundance of resources nowadays that you go and Google or ask ChatGPT or Claude or whatever LM you want to use, give me a structure for QBR, EBR, onboarding, then you give your specifics, your size of a team, average
The size, yeah, yeah.
customers per CSM, all of that, and you can get it. The what you need to do as a leader is you need to make this change management. You need to manage the change within the team and the mindset, and you need to make this scalable. You need to get the people's buy-in and that's where leaders sometimes I think get it wrong. You can't
Yeah.
drive the change yourself. You need to bring the people across. And that's what I I'm very fond of like my team because they take projects, they take responsibility, and they bring the change themselves sometimes. Because as a leader, you can't do it all on your own. You have to get the buy-in from people. The easiest way to get the buy-in is one person gets it or starts doing it and shows the way to the rest. That's how I did it myself, like in the early days as a CS leader. Every fundamental change, every very inspirational moment I wanted to bring to the company or to my team, I would just lead the change and then the rest will follow. And that's what our teams do. So that's why I'm saying like people still live in 2022 when they start posting like QBR is a must or you shouldn't treat customer success as a support team or you need to get like the CEO's visibility and all of these type of topics that you go to the with all the respect, I really respect the folks there, like the top 100 voices on customer success, and probably one quarter of them speak about the same
Yeah.
repetitive things, but no one speaks about how can you actually make the next step? How can you make these very manual processes with the help of AI, for example, at scale to really bring the value that you want to your customers? Like it's this kind of, we need to understand as leaders that it's your responsibility as a leader that you have button up customer journey based on the way you want to do it. You can do it the old school t-shirt size way, a small, medium, large enterprise sort of
Yeah.
approach with customers, or you want to do it like in a more complex way, like more scientific, where it's based on the approach, based on the growth potential, based on different indicators, based on your ICP, of course, that's a must, and act on it. However, like I think that's just things that we need to go beyond. Recently, there was like a real hype on a lady. She can forgive me about forgetting her last name, Andrea. She made a whole hype about bringing QBRs for 15 minutes. How to run QBRs for 15 minutes. Think about it. Like quarterly business reviews where you would expect to have a high executives that you run it for 15 minutes. Even if it doesn't matter if it's a recording or it doesn't matter if it's like on how you can actually prepare and run it for 15 minutes. That's challenging and that's actually bringing next level customer success, right? To be more efficient, to be more at scale. And quite frankly, people don't have time for 1 hour QBR where you speak for half an
Yeah.
hour, like what happened, and then 15 minutes on your roadmap and 15 minutes on where they're heading. Like they need, this is what we've done, this is where we're heading, this is
Yeah.
how can we help you? And then she did it like in a very concise way.
Nice. Well done, Andrea. Whoever you are, we don't know who you are, but you're out there somewhere. So, another question I wanted to ask you was around the foundations, right? One of the things that you said, I think it was on that same conversation that we had, is you can't really start using AI if you don't have the foundations in place, right? Is there like a checklist? Is there a maturity? Is there like a moment where you need to earn before you start actually experimenting with AI?
So I cannot say I'm an expert. I'm learning as I go. And one of the core things that I learned myself is first you need to identify the problem you're trying to solve. and then look into solutions, whether that's AI or some other tool or method. That's fundamentally what you need to have. However, if you want to bring AI and say tomorrow bringing AI and we're going to automate the entire customer journey, but you don't have a single process that is standard, then that's like I would say the first thing. And that's also like the fundamental of actually even getting a customer success platform.
Yeah.
Like I wouldn't have gone to the extent of doing RFP and getting to try different tools and talk to like different vendors and selecting Velaris if we didn't have, let's say, 3 to 4 really standard processes that I know that once I bring more data and I
Yeah.
structure it and I bring the team on board because they've been saying that they need it for years,
Yeah.
because then the buy-in is easier and then you can actually make the step. And it's the same with AI. Right now, I'm looking at every stage of the journey. What can be done with AI? What is the problem we're trying to solve, and for who? When I look at the customer journey, I look at like the whole pre-sales to all the
Yeah.
way to the unfortunate churn that sometimes happens, but we're in that recurring industry and customers, of course, churn or contract.
Yeah.
And what we need to realize is that, or what I realized myself throughout the years, like when you build digital customer success, which is the other 2022 topic that customers or customer success leaders talk about, is, and what I've learned by doing and reading and watching best practices myself, is I divide it based on the journey, based
Yeah.
on the persona, based on the plans we have, because there's a fundamental knowledge that every customer needs to have, whether it's an admin or a simple user. Then you start building it based on their use case and based on the maturity level within your platform that they need to have to bring that adoption higher and higher.
Yeah.
And this is something that we're trying to also automate and trying where we can actually move the needle for the better for the customer.
Yeah. That's really interesting. Costa, let's wrap up with two questions I always ask. What does a world-class CS team look like in 3 years?
I think a world-class CS team runs with world-class NRR, like the North Star for every SaaS, right? 130, 140 plus NRR, which of course it's a very revenue-driven and a focused metric. But I think in 3 years, a world-class customer success is a well-balanced and oiled machine between AI, automation, and human interaction, where you have, I think I spoke to you about it, and I really like this view of how AI can be split. It's predictable, it's prescriptive, and it's generative. You have predictable signals coming from AI to you,
Yeah.
then you have prescriptive actions based on the data with your customer, because maybe a phone call works better than a video call, or a Slack message works better than an email, like the right action you need to take.
Yeah.
And then generative generates the output that you need for the outreach for the customer. And that's where the human part comes in. The whole process is automated, but it's AI driven. And this is like something that I think a lot of folks and a lot of like in the industry are aiming for. A lot of platforms are trying to break the echo around AI on
Yeah.
this. And so that's for me, a world-class customer success is a team that fundamentally adds value to their customers, and the customers know what they can expect from their CSM. I like to say, and I always like every team I've managed in the past, I always like to for them to think of like extension of their customer, like being their imaginary or not that much imaginary colleague that is always there to help them, to console them, and to
Yeah.
partner with them and to champion, to make them this shining star that can actually bring the value from the two across the company, whether it's saving time, whether it's speed to market, whether it's return on investment,
Yeah.
or saving costs.
I like that because it does it's basically like the timeless principles or foundations of CS, right? Like it's got nothing to do with AI in the next 3 years, right? If you're delivering value. I love that answer actually. And last one, it has to be bold. One bold prediction about the future of AI in post sales teams.
We're going to have AI agents in our org chart.
So just like a colleague.
Yeah, just like a colleague. Yes. Like you look at the org, like for example, you have the head of CS or VP or whoever, and then you might have like a AI CS ops running things behind the scenes for you. And then you have your AI marketeer that provides you with the cadences that you need to run and feeds it, all of them feed information to your human-led customers.
Will to an agent? You reckon we'll get to that point?
No, the minute we get to that is this doomsday, like where everyone is predicting about AI with the super intelligence. I think we're not gonna get to that level because I think
Hopefully.
AI should always be managed by human because that's where we bring the creativity, where that's where we bring um, the sentiment, that's where we bring the empathy, that's where we bring all the human things that make us humans down the line
Yeah.
versus the AI that needs to be prompt the right way. So I think it's like they're going to be more of assistants rather than
Yeah.
leaders, like
Yeah.
in that space. Yeah.
Fantastic. Costa, thank you so much for spending this hour with us. It's been great having you.
Thank you too.
Thank you.
Likewise. Thank you.